Okay, so we're going to talk about it because I want to talk about it. So, I just keep hearing there's like this man and he's in his head. He just constantly just keeps thinking about why this woman's vagina smells the way in which that it does. So the thing is that we did a reading. I already told you she's not taking care of herself. So I'm going to kind of explain certain things about the vagina. So when a woman gets close to her menstrual cycle, sometimes her vagina will communicate with her that her cycle is coming. And every period cycle that a woman has is, sometimes it's different depending on what she has been taking her body through from month to month, because some months is harder than others. When I'm not eating like I should be eating, I'm going to experience a lot of cramps. I'm going to experience, a lot of things going on with my stomach. And there are a lot of things that go on with me emotionally. I can only tell you about me because, every woman is different. So you have to get to know your woman, and you have to connect, not just to her, but also connect to her vagina too. I know that most men, I would say women too, but a homosexual woman, she knows more about the vagina because she has one. So for the man, I just want to explain some things about the vagina. So you may not know, and I don't think that any woman is going to take the time out to show you or explain to you, but we kind of go through phases, right? So before we come on our period, we will experience a little spotting, and sometimes the spotting comes off like discharge, and I'm going to tell you that shit stinks the most. Okay, it stinks the most before it comes, and it stinks the most after. Okay, so it's kind of like her body is trying to communicate to her. My thing is that it's pretty much she's about to come on her cycle. Okay, and that's what I pick up. She's about to come on her cycle. But I also, when I tapped into the situation a little bit more, so I don't know if this woman has like a BBL, or she has a bigger butt, if she has nails or something like that, because I had picked up, like there's an integration between things going on from the rear end that is mixing in with the vagina. So in the reading, this is why I said she's just not taking care of herself. Okay. Now, when it comes to the BBLs, it's a little more complicated, because when you get the injections of the BBLs, where you get the injections at, it can cause infection because the skin has broken, you know. And with being a woman, and then with being a woman, I don't have the biggest butt, but sometimes I have to spread cheeks to wipe myself. So I can only imagine, a woman with a BBL, and things may be a little more challenging for her to get up in there. But for the most part, it has a lot to do with the infections of the wounds. So you have to consider that. And when it comes to infection will leak out pus. And I don't know if the women can feel the discomfort. I don't know if it's irritating them. You never know if they know what's going on or not. Okay. And a lot of the times it has something to do with her pH balance. So maybe she's not eating the most healthiest foods that are contributing to her sexual wellness, which is her genitals. She could be, maybe she needs to change out her washcloth. Maybe she needs to buy new underwear, get rid of the old ones. Maybe she wears too many thongs. She could be going through some yeast situations, considering that I had picked up that there is a mixture between her feces and her vagina. That can be a sign of overeating, or, like a lack of wiping herself properly. Most women know that you wipe from front to back, but there are some women, who don't know that. And so if you think about it, if they're wiping from back to front, then what's going on in the back comes to the front. And sometimes even if a woman does not like take a shit and she still wipes from the back to the front, well, there's bacteria around the anus, so she's still wiping it inside of the vagina. Okay. Another thing is that maybe the two of you are having too much sex. When I was in a relationship and I was having a lot of sex, and the individual used to ejaculate in me all the time, I noticed how my vagina, I'm just like, ugh. Every time he comes at me, it's like my vagina gives off this smell, and that can have a lot to do with the man and what he is eating. But at the same time, it can have a lot to do with how much you're having sex too. Okay? Too much of anything is not good for you, and your juices may not mix well with her vagina if you are not practicing safe sex. Okay? Because your sperm holds bacteria. Anything that we release from our body is releasing toxin, so you're releasing that inside of her. So I mean, you have to consider that too. Okay. But I feel like the issue that you're having is very simple. It's kind of like a mixture, like I said, of the feces and her vagina. So maybe she's not, like wiping properly, or she needs to take more showers, maybe even a bath, more, just kind of like soak in a bathtub. So, maybe you can run her a nice romantic bath, Epsom salt, bubble bath, if she likes the bath bombs, put some bath bombs in there, some rose petals, rosemary, or some jasmine flowers or something like that. That will not only help her physically, but it will help her energetically too. Okay, so now, like I said, going back to the BBL, or if she has like a big butt, my thing is, for one, as a woman, like I said, my butt is not that big, but I be having to spread the cheeks, especially when women wear nails. It's kind of hard to get up in there. You see women with those really, really long nails. I be like, I wonder how she wipes her butt, like with having such long nails. Because it's like, I'm pretty sure they know what to do. They know how to do so many other things with those very long nails too. So, it's not anything that is alarming, because I feel like this guy, he wants to know, like, does she have an STD or something? Okay. So that could, depending on how strong the odor is, yes. Yes. If she doesn't have a medical condition, but she's giving off this very strong smell to where it's kind of like, it's kind of like funking up the whole room, that is a sign of gonorrhea. Okay? That is a sign of gonorrhea. The bacteria within the vagina is a lot. So she's going to give off this smell. If it kind of smells like Cheez-Its, Cheez-Its, the crackers, if it smells like that, that is a sign. When it comes to discharge, I feel like when it comes to discharge, it varies. But that has a lot to do with pH. Whenever a woman is discharging, it's kind of communicating to her that, there may be something going on with her pH balance. But if a woman is very secretive, which means that she's very wet, she's going to deal with a lot of discharge. But as long as the discharge is not a dark color, before you come on your period, you go through this phase of ovulation, which lets you know that the woman is fertile. So she may experience like thick whiteness, in her drawers, My thing is that if it's like a yellowish, brownish, greenish type of color, that's, that's a bit of a warning sign. But at the same time, when it comes to her spotting on her period, it's going to be like a brownish type of color. Because, when you're spotting, it's like dry blood. You know, it's different from when you're on your period, your actual cycle, because that's when it turns like bloody ass red, right? So, what else? If somebody is dealing with a daughter, this is going to be for a man, and he's dealing with like a young girl, a young teen. He can't really get too personal with her, but he really doesn't have like maybe a woman that he trusts with his daughter, or whoever the young woman is. Baby girl just needs some help with learning how to just learning like vagina wellness, how to wipe herself, how to keep herself dry down there on the outside. If she's preteen, then and she hasn't come on her period, it could be a sign that she's about to come on her period. Okay, she may not necessarily feel comfortable with telling you about what's going on, but you may smell some things going on with her, and it's kind of like you don't know what to say. Well, you got to say something. You can't be worried about, just be gentle about what you say, because you don't want her to go to school and the children, are talking about her, joking her and all that type of stuff. So you definitely want to say something. And you want to figure out, if there's something medical going on with her. So you may want to take her to the OBGYN. I feel like after a young girl comes on her period, that's when she needs to, like start having like, so, the OBGYN checkups. Maybe something every month, maybe every 2 months, maybe every 6 months. I'm going to say every 6 months. You shouldn't really have to go to the OBGYN like normally, if you're taking care of yourself, you know what I'm saying? But I understand for younger women, and especially when they're approaching the age of their cycle, there are things going on. The biggest thing is just taking care of yourself and just being consistent and taking care. Sometimes with women, we get a little lazy. We get a little lazy. So, it's funny because men, they get with these women, then they find out that, these women are kind of more disgusting than they are. You know what I'm saying? Child, sometimes women don't even want to live with another man. They don't even want to live with a man because they want to be disgusting in peace. You know what I'm saying? But shit, men can't talk, because sometimes them balls be raunchy too. My thing is that, you know, me as a woman, I don't give a fuck about that. You know, I done sucked a couple of musty balls and yeasty balls. I mean, I really just don't give a fuck. And I think that that is a healthy woman. And I kind of feel like a healthy man, healthy masculinity, he doesn't mind the smell of pussy. But if it's not smelling like pussy, then, you have to say something though. You cannot be afraid because you care about this person. So you want to make sure that they're taking care of themselves. And then on top of that, you don't want you don't want this person embarrassing themselves, like, and other people are talking about them, just being real mean and cruel. You know what I'm saying? But it's hard to keep that smell down during your period, especially if a woman wears pads. A lot of the times on my cycle, I stay in the house and I wear pads because I really don't like being plugged up. I will usually put my tampon in if I have work or, if I'm going to be out and about. But then on top of that, they have these cups now, and I have tried the disposable cups. I think that those are pretty cool, but they can get, they can just kind of get like a little messy. They can get a little messy, but I enjoy the disposable cups. I was like, wow, this shit really works. And inside of a woman's vagina, like, she knows when to take the tampon out. So a lot of the times the tampon will swell up and it may begin to cause discomfort. That's how she knows, okay, the tampon is full, we got to replace it. When it comes to the cup, what I noticed was I'm just like, ugh, I don't feel too good. Like, it's like my whole body was just trying to come. It's like it was screaming, take the cup out, take the cup out. I felt kind of like sick to my stomach. I started to have some really serious mental things going on. I said, oh my goodness, because the body is releasing the toxin. So if she's sitting there and her vagina is filling up with toxins, it's going to affect her way of thinking. You ever heard of a woman to where she got a tampon stuck up in her and she didn't know it was there? Women lose their mind. They lose their mind if something like that happens and they don't know, because that tampon is just sitting there absorbing all of the toxins. I really hate using tissue, because with the tissue, sometimes you get those tissue balls and they build up inside of your vagina and you don't even know. So when I do use tissue, I want to say every month, I go inside of myself and I just kind of feel around to see if there are any tissue balls. But for the most part, I like using wipes. But to buy a pack of toilet paper is cheaper, and it's for the whole house. I'm not the only one who uses the tissue. It's not just about me. So when it comes to me buying my wipes, when I'm able to buy my wipes, I will buy my wipes. And I prefer that women use lavender wipes, because the lavender wipes leave a nice smell. It don't matter what you got. I mean, I'm just saying, like, if you take a poo and you wipe with the lavender wipes, it's like you don't have no smell, no odor, because it's wet. You're getting more. You're getting more. It's cleaner. You know what I'm saying? The only thing is the wetness, because women have to stay dry. We have to stay dry in the crack. We have to stay dry outside of the vagina, because that avoids like the odors. Another thing too, when it comes to hair carries odor. You know what I'm saying? So if she has like bourgeois going on down there, you may be the type of guy to where you don't care about the hair on the pussy. That's some old school stuff. You know what I mean? That's old school, baby. And I can appreciate a man who's not going to put pressure on his woman to always have a bald ego. But at the same time, you can eliminate like a lot of problems with reducing the amount of hair that you have down there. And then, hair carries bacteria too. Okay. So I'm trying to think about, is there anything else? I'm pretty sure the symptoms. You got to study her behavior too. If you think something is going on with her vagina, you have to study her behavior. It just kind of seems like this person was just very disturbed in their thoughts about, this woman's vagina. And I'm just like, I don't understand why it's all of that. Because I mean, shit, most men, they don't give a fuck if that shit funky. They don't really be caring, from my experience. Because I'd be like, well, no, let me take a shower, like let me get myself together. A lot of the times they be like, can't wait. Like, it's fine. No. So I'm just like, oh, okay. But for the most part, I think that we've covered everything that we need to kind of cover. So we're going to leave it here. All right. So until the next time, we'll talk again. Thank you.